or even television, I think a lot of those build-outs were uneconomical. In many ways, people argue that we've never really had profits in networks in general, in communications. The cellular network as well. And so, in fact, how that layer of the stack, of communication stack, the sort of infrastructure layer, has always been marginally break-even and very difficult in the beginning with a lot of losses. However, that does not count the money from Facebook. That does not count the money from Google or even from Amazon. The point I'm making is that the stack is far, far higher. You have, at the base, you have communications, then you have devices, then you have operating systems, then you have apps, and then you have ecosystems, and then you have services. All of these things, and usually the money is really captured at the very top of the stack. And yet who's holding it up is at the very bottom of the stack. And it's interesting how we think about cars, and yes, although the car itself might be a profitable business, there's a bunch of subsidies that also enable it, not just in terms of wars of fuel, but also things like parking. Parking often is buried, where the costs come from and so on. So here's my proposition. I don't have an answer, it's too complicated for taking that puzzle apart, but I do have this proposition, which is, let's assume it is a smartphone on wheels. And then the utility value of the bit transmitted, or the minute of voice that gets carried, that is basically a zero profit business. But what we ended up with is figuring out redirecting people's attention. We figured out how to get people to buy more stuff, or see some ads, or something that motivated consumption to the point where, again, we're using 3-4 hours a day on these things. And somebody figured out how to make money from that without charging $1 a bit, or whatever it was, the going rate in the 1980s for transmission of data, or transmission of voice, which was also very expensive. That became buried in a base cost, which we pay in a bucket, kind of a bill we get every month, but we don't think about it. We are really, really getting our value, and therefore paying on things what are called over the top. So this we experience in communications, we're experiencing also in entertainment, where what is the value of a song has changed from a piece of a $20 album to $1 for a download. Basically, I have no idea. I just pay $10 a month and I just can listen or not listen. And so when we went to streaming, the entertainment industry changed, both video and audio. Now the question is this, let me put it to you this way. What if really the dollar per mile goes to zero? And it would do so not necessarily on the cost basis, but on the price basis, because instead of us paying for it, we get a coupon at the end of the journey for the shop we're visiting. Or our employer somehow subsidizes it because they have an incentive to do so for whatever green benefit they might get. But I don't know what the apps are, because if you asked me in 2005 what would be the killer app for the smartphone, first of all, it doesn't exist, it wouldn't have existed, but I would have had to say, well, maybe it would be, I don't know, music or something like that, or browsing. We ended up with social media. We ended up with swiping, we ended up with liking. This is the money. And so what is that for transportation? What is the layer on top of the very top of the stack? Every car trip ends in a financial transaction. Why doesn't Ford get paid for that transaction? Why doesn't Ford get a commission whenever you go to the grocery store? But that's exactly what Google does. That's how we build the best communications in the world. This is how we build the best user interfaces in the world. And we feel like we're super connected and super informed, although that has its own consequences, but nonetheless, that's the world we built. And we didn't build it by charging for every bit.
Other questions?
So my question would be, as a futurist, what would you project in 5 years, and what would you support if it were your own intellectual property and you as an inventor? What if you have sort of milling around that you can share with the public?
Well, what I'd like to see happen, because 5 years isn't that long, I would like to see is an exploration of different market segments. As I said before, we understand now, by the way, in the phone business that you've got people who are willing to pay for a premium, and there are people who are not. And you know, you sell the product according to different distribution, different pricing, and different packaging. And so it's kind of like we're not there yet. We're not sophisticated about understanding the users very well. So it'd be great to say, like, you know, and here's a puzzler for you. We pay a lot of money. You're a Peloton user, and he paid a lot of money for his bike. He paid a lot of money for his monthly subscription. He's not going anywhere. He's cycling there and he's staying in one place. But we somehow, and here's another puzzle for you. You don't pay anything to ride the elevator. But when you go to the gym, you pay to use a Stairmaster. Now, that means that the job to be done here, that people think about activity as not something that you do to get places. You think about activity as something that you do for yourself, to feel good about yourself and your health and everything else. I'd love to be able to blend these two and say, hey, you know, at Peloton, maybe you can grow a pair of wheels. Wouldn't that be clever?
That'd be a bike.
And that would be a bike. Somehow I invented a bike. But that's, now it's not there because again, you don't have the infrastructure and you don't feel safe and it's too cold, too hot or whatever. But we gotta solve that puzzle. So let's find a way to save energy, save the environment, and save our health as well. And to do so with active mobility.
So what would you call that? Because I'd like to call GoDaddy and get the domain right now.
I wish I could. I mean, this is one of the things I envision that I just find a little bit as a, you know, you observe a paradox and you say, well, that doesn't make sense. So let's see if we can find a solution. You know, and also other things like, you know, if you're going to have a vehicle for going to, you know, lunch is different than the one that you're going home with, or something like that. You know, like segmentation. Because how many cars are there? Notice how we have Jeeps and we have Porsches. Now, it's funny, by the way, I mentioned those two because when they interviewed people who had gotten rid of a Porsche, Porsche did this, right? The Volkswagen Group, they said, oh, we're sorry to see you go as a Porsche owner. Could you tell us what you bought as a substitute? And they probably were thinking, oh, maybe you got a Ferrari or a Mustang. No, Jeep was the most substituted brand for Porsche, which means that the job for Porsche was not to go fast. It was not to, you know, run slalom or whatever it is they do on a racetrack. It was because it was something on the weekend to get away, have some fun, maybe with one other person. So it was intimacy, it was something, and said, well, for me, sometimes it's a drive in the mountains, sometimes it's a run through a wooded park or something like that. So all these things are fascinating to me, and I think we should approach transportation with this philosophy of not just utility, but what is the job to be done.
So in closing, I just want to invite you to an event on Thursday evening at the Washington Convention Center, 5 p.m. It's a preview peak show for the Washington Auto Show. Price is right. I'm buying free beers for you if you like, free food. And you can pitch to as many automakers or anyone who happens to be there.
Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Tomorrow, the U.S. Conference of Mayors is going to have their winter meeting. I guess about 275 mayors from across the country are going to be here. Transportation and transit is one of the big issues. Is there any city that's a model for micromobility and sort of getting it right? And also, in addition, are there any car makers that are also involved in the micromobility, futuristic kind of space?
Let me take the second easier. It's easily easier. Actually, Ford's done a good job. I think they've invested in one of the early micromobility companies called Spin, so they're getting their hands dirty, if you will, on that. I think that there's investors also coming from tier one automakers, not the automakers, but tier one suppliers that are dabbling in motors and parts in the micro vehicles. Schaeffler comes to mind in Germany, and Denso in Japan. Toyota's also done a lot with micro vehicles of its own design, so trying to figure out how to fit a vehicle to a person, right? Fit that. But as far as cities, the models, I think, you know, I mentioned Los Angeles as an early adopter. Perhaps it's not the best example. There's been friction there as well with various disputes about who owns the data about these trips. But I think in general, unfortunately it's not an American city, but Berlin has done an amazing job of welcoming this business, and we end up with 30 different companies offering different types of mobility in that one city. So I think it's still too early to call, kind of best practices. It's only been about 2.5 years.
So if you were mayor, what would you tell them to do at this moment?
Well, I would say, well, first, it's not, should be free for all. We need to have a way to entertain the offers to supply services, and we need to be able to categorize it. There are some thoughts here as far as how to have that conversation, but I think NACTO as an organization has put forward guidelines on how to write a contract, for example. This may not be the best contract, but it is a starting point.
So
I think,
they're in conversation with mayors and with cities of
yeah, it's a National Association of City Transport Officials. Yes.
transportation.
Yeah.
So just I guess in closing until we turn to the panel, I mean, I would just, we care about oil use, I guess that translates to emissions as well. And I think everyone has grabbed a page of facts. I mean, what's really, I think, amazing is if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, just the amount of kilowatt hours that you spend to go, in a car. It takes a kilowatt to go a mile, and then electric cars go 4 miles, and then one of these it's over 60 or 80 miles. It's pretty incredible. But then I think above that, to me, it's to remember that this is 1.0. This is like really, I don't even think we're at 1.0, and I think really the big thing is to remember that there's a whole host of form factors we haven't even thought about, and to allow that innovation to happen.
It's like in the cell phone business, if we use that same analogy, it's like, remember back in the mid-90s when you had the brick phones, and it's about where we are right now. So a lot to go before we get to the iPhone.
Great, thank you all very much. So let's, thank you. Chairs? You have a couple chairs here? Just going right here. I feel like